There's something for every imagination at your local comic shop. Visit ComicShopLocator.com to find a store near you.
Hi, I'm Keanu Reeves, and I'm excited to introduce you to Berserker, a new comic book epic that kicks off in comic stores everywhere. It's a dream come true for me to create Berserker and collaborate with legends in the industry like writer Matt Kent, artist Ron Garney, color artist Bill Crabtree, letterer Clem Robbins, and artist Raphael Grandpont, providing character designs and covers, along with the great folks at Boom Studios. Creating and co-writing Berserker is a thrill for me, as I've loved comics since I was a young kid, and they've been a significant influence on me artistically throughout my career. If you want to pre-order your copy, just contact your local comic shop, which you can find by visiting ComicShopLocator.com, and let them know you want them to pull a copy of Berserker for you every month. That's all it takes to join us for this exciting 12-issue series about an immortal man cursed with power, forced into violence, and searching for meaning in a life consumed by chaos. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy it.
What's up, everybody? It's Kyle. How's it going? So, check it out. I wanted to come on, and we've got an interview here coming up in just a minute with Dan Jurgens and Nick Barrucci. But first, I wanted to remind you guys that now is the time. If you're interested in Berserker, we just saw the spot with Keanu. We just saw all that stuff. Now is the time, your last chance to get with your comic shop and tell them you want it. You got to call them, Facebook message them, email, carrier pigeon, smoke signals, Morse code, whatever you got to do to tell your local comic shop that you want Berserker by Keanu Reeves from Boom Studios. You got to do it now. Now, if you don't have a local comic shop, head over to ComicShopLocator.com. And they will be, and type in your zip code, and it'll tell you where the local comic shops are in your area. So, what are you waiting for? Obviously, do it during this video. Send an email, send a Facebook message while we're listening to Dan Jurgens. But if not, as soon as we're done here in about an hour, make sure you hit up your local comic shop. I will be back at the end of the video to remind you to hit up your local comic shop with this. But right now, let's get into talking shop. I'm back. See, I was only gone for a second. This is Talking Shop. See, this is why I shouldn't do these things live. This is Talking Shop, guys. Nick Barrucci is about to sit down with the legendary creator Dan Jurgens. This interview is from a couple weeks ago, but this is a great interview because it talks about stuff that's coming out that Dan is working on now that you need to be getting ahead of on your orders for your local comic shop. So we're going to switch over to that right now. Make sure you tune in tomorrow night for our interview with Ryan Stegman. But right now, we're going to sit down with the man who killed the Superman and did so much other stuff, Dan Jurgens.
Thanks for doing this interview, the first of what I hope is many. Now, it's appropriate that you're the first that I hope is many on a lot of levels.
Okay.
And first and foremost, a proper introduction. Are you ready?
Let's go for it.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, the Dan Jurgens, the man who has worked on every iconic character at Marvel and DC. You've handled the Justice League. You worked on Superman, which may be what you're most famous for. You've worked on Firestorm. You created Booster Gold. You started off on Warlord, if I'm remembering correctly. And I think you worked on the Legion of Superheroes.
Yep.
And you had a great run on the Teen Titans with George Perez inking you. Plus, you had a Green Arrow run. And let's not forget that you created the Tangent Universe for DC. Then at Marvel, you had what I consider one of the best Thor runs in comics, and you worked with John Romita Jr. and Andy Kubert, two creators that are basically legends in and of themselves. You have tackled the Fantastic Four. You had a great run on Captain America. And the only one I can't remember, and again, you've worked on almost every Marvel character as well, is whether or not you had a run on the Avengers, or if you did an Avengers miniseries is what I remember.
Yeah, that's what it was. Did an Avengers miniseries that Jerry Ordway and I teamed up on, and we did that in the Fantastic Four thing. I also did an Iron Fist miniseries. I think that kind of covers the Marvel. Oh, and Spider-Man. I
was going to get to Spider-Man last because seriously, you always mention Spider-Man last because he is the most iconic. Yeah. I know since the Marvel movies, obviously people think Iron Man and Captain America and Thor, but I still think on so many levels, Peter Parker, he is the character we can most associate with, the man with the feet of clay, the person who still has the most problems and who overcomes them. Now, I want to ask you one question to start. Okay. Actually, no, I don't. Thank God Dan knows me and I jump around. Thank God you know me and I jump around. One of the reasons why it's appropriate that you're the first person I interview, when we first started Dynamic Forces, we started as National Comic Services. Mm-hmm. And I realized how terrible of a name that was.
And National Periodical Publications.
Well, that worked better in the 1930s, I think, and early 40s. Now, it just seemed like National made us sound big. We were a mail order company, autograph comics, because I was a weekend warrior. I saw fans line up to get autographs, and I thought, well, Jim Lee or Sam Keith or Dan Jurgens, they can't be at every convention every weekend. People will want their autographs. Let's do mail order. And National Comic Services just started sounding hokey, and it became where I said, we need something more dynamic, more forceful. And then Dynamic Forces happened. So you being the first interview, you were the first transformation from National Comic Services to Dynamic Forces with the death of Superman.
Right.
And we've known each other since then, at the very least. We may have known each other before that from the convention circuit, but that was our true first introduction to each other. Right. So my first question to you, because who the hell wants to hear the boring question of your origin story and how you got into comics? I'm sure people can Google it and read it a million times.
True.
Why comics? You're a talented creator, and especially when you got into comics, advertising was more attractive, animation was more attractive, there was more money in those fields, but you decided to dive into comics. And you tackled, I think first, like I mentioned, Warlord at DC, and you could tell me I'm misremembering, which is fine, but what made you take this step? And I'm, beyond the fact that you have a passion for it.
Right. What makes comics unique, and for me is, and I was already working in the advertising design industry when I got into comics and doing well. And what made comics unique for me, and what I like about them, is when people really ask me what I do, I don't necessarily say I'm a writer or I'm an illustrator. I really say I'm a storyteller. And what I like about comics and what makes them so unique, especially if you write and draw, is the ability to have an idea, to realize it on the page in this fusion of words and images that make it something very, very unique. And it's interesting too, because the amount of control over you get over the product, which you don't get as a screenwriter, you don't get if you're writing, movies, TV, anything else. You get it if you're writing books, but books typically don't have the illustrations to go along with it. Comics are singularly unique. I'm a storyteller, and for me, this is how I prefer to tell stories. So that is the answer to why comics.
Okay. And I think that's a great answer. You know, in a little bit, I'm probably going to talk about something that may or may not embarrass you, which is going to be the fun part of this. So I want you to be a little nervous going into that.
Definitely.
But okay, so going to the storytelling, so you've cut your teeth on a lot of creators. You and I've talked about the fact that you brought Starbreaker back. You've revisited and reintroduced characters that I would say other people may not have ever done a good job of. And you always do it with a passion. But I do want to talk about your Thor run for a minute, because that is one of my favorite. I think take Stan and Jack out of the equation, okay? Because they're always going to be the people you think of.
100%.
I think there are 5 great Thor runs. And this is my personal opinion. Everyone will have different opinions. Walt Simonson, I think many people, at least of a certain age, feel he had the best Thor run.
Terrific.
I think that you had a great one, and you worked with 2 incredible talents, with John Romita Jr. and then with Andy Kubert.
Yeah, and then and don't forget, Stuart Immonen came in after that.
And Stuart Immonen, you're right.
Yeah.
And that was before I think people appreciated Stuart for who he is.
Right. Probably true.
Yeah, on a lot of levels, I think Stuart is one of the greatest artists in comics today that the industry took too long to appreciate how great he was. Creators appreciated it.
Yes.
And the publishers appreciated it. But the industry and the fans finally caught up. I think you've got Joe Michael Straczynski. His run is in the top 5. Jason Aaron, his run's in the top 5. And Donny Cates, his run is in the top 5.
Mm-hmm.
So my question to you is, I can tell, I think, on some levels, when you're writing for yourself and when you're writing for an artist. When you're writing, and obviously you've also drawn something other writers have written, which I don't feel like that's as much of the storytelling aspect that we want to talk about, or at least that I want to talk about today. But when you write for an artist, I've always noticed that you do a great job of bringing the best out of them. And when you write for yourself, your stories are really fluid. And it's just, they're both great experiences. And I'm more curious about what prep you do when you're working with another artist.
Well, one of the things I do is, first of all, and we can use Thor as a really good example, I think, because, at that time, Thor hadn't been seen for a while. Marvel had stopped publishing it, and they did the books went, and some of the Image guys, Jim and Rob were doing their 4 books from Marvel, and that included the Avengers. So Marvel wasn't publishing Thor. And then when they brought these characters back, it was part of the Heroes Reborn effort. And they had actually approached me about 1.5 years, 2 years earlier about doing Thor, and I turned it down. But this time around, it was much more of a clean slate. And they said, we want John to draw this. So John and I talked a little bit about how he saw the character, what I wanted to accomplish with the series. And what I always try and do is, it's not so much finding out what my artists want to draw. It's finding out how they see the character. Because if I understand how they see the character and I can fuse that with how I see the character, then I can write to that a little bit. And one of the things I also do is, I'm not a fan of full scripts in comics. I just don't think, I think they tend to limit artists visually. Not all full script writers limit their artists, but many, many do. And I always felt as like I had my hands tied if I was an artist and I was working on a full script. So certainly with Thor, whether it was John, whether it was Andy, or things we've done since, I write plot first that says, here's the story, here's the flow of the story, here are the main components, the main big points in the story that have to come across visually, the character beats that have to come across, and I break it down that way. And then I let them take it and run it so they can express themselves and their vision of the character, which is exactly what John did on Thor. And I keep telling him to this day that out of all the stuff he's ever done, whether it's at DC with Superman, Batman, whatever, or at Marvel with his great Daredevil, Spidey stuff, X-Men, whatever, I still think Thor was his best work. And I say that as a fan of him and his work. And, you know, it was much the same way with Andy. I write a plot that gives them everything they need to know, but also gives them room to take the story and run with it a little bit. And that makes it more visual. And Thor is a very visual character. And it gives them a chance to elevate the story. And it gets their passion on the page more so than I think a full script does. I think too often artists working from a full script feel like technicians. And that's the last thing you want an artist in comics to feel like. So that's my explanation.
That's interesting. And I'll tell you why. There are a lot of people, I never knew you didn't work full script. There are many creators when they work the Marvel method, when they work the plot, the bullet points, artists do tend to talk about when they feel it's, for lack of a better way of saying, lacking, missing, where a writer expresses that they're doing it the Marvel method to give artists more room, yet the artist sometimes feels like it's the writer being lazy and being able to script. And, you know, we're not going
to jump in, here's why. Because they, you know, if you're just going to say page 12, Spider-Man and Doc Ock land on top of a moving train, they fight until page 18, and then Spider-Man gets knocked off the train, and you have to come up with the entire fight and choreograph that. Yes, that's laziness.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I was going with this, is that the reason why I've never heard it is because you're obviously delivering to the artist what they need to do it. Because look, at the end of the day, artists aren't afraid to talk about this stuff in the bar, you know, at San Diego Comic-Con, and sometimes outside of a bar. So in today's social media, it feels like every nook and cranny, deserve it or undeserve it, gets out there. No, that's you know, and obviously I keep bringing up Thor because I found it so refreshing and so great. And I thought you pulled the best out of those two creators. And then you worked with Andy a little bit on Captain America, I think. And then you worked on Captain America yourself, writing and drawing it. And as you said, you worked on Spider-Man during the Clone Saga, which, you know, it's weird. It's kind of like Wolverine without the adamantium. In retrospect, a lot of people dislike it, but there are people that grew up reading it that love it, which is why the Clone Saga might come back, which is why Wolverine without the adamantium may come back. There are fans that love it.
I'm telling you, I am amazed that, you know, I feel like at cons, I probably went like a 10-year period where I didn't see that many Spider-Man issues that I had done to sign. And that seemed to change right around 2005 to 2010, somewhere in there. But now the amount of Spidey stuff I get to sign really is amazing. And somewhere along the lines, whether it was those kids, if that's what they were growing up, whether it was just people who went back and kind of rediscovered it and said, yeah, there was something of worth here after all. But I am amazed that all that Spider-Man stuff has resurfaced to the extent that it has, which I think is awesome. I mean, you know I just saw someone making a Ben Reilly version Spider-Man action figure that was just looked incredible with, and by the way, it was Mark Bagley that designed that costume, with Bag's costume on it. And it just looks great. So it's funny to see how things resurface sometimes.
It is. Matter of fact, some people might say it was sensational, but
yes.
Not amazing that you get all these books. It's sensational.
Yeah.
Mark is, again, for someone, Mark Bagley is one of the most professional creators in comics.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. He's like John Romita Jr., that he can do so much work, and it is so great every time. He consistently gives his A game in every issue. And that is not that that's rare in the industry, but you kind of don't notice because it's just there and you appreciate it, you love it. And he's one of these creators that can actually stay on a book for a long run. And you've stayed on books for significant runs.
Yeah, and I again, I have told Mark this, but I think the run that he and Bendis did on Spider-Man really still doesn't get enough credit. Whenever you take two guys who are there for 100+ issues, like they were, fans don't realize what kind of work, commitment, and dedication that takes. And they did it, and they did it really well. And that is so rare. And one of the comments I get from the complaints that I get from artists all the time is writers get all the glory, they get all the credit, and no one talks about us. And I'll say, well, last year you were on this series for 3 issues, and you did 4 issues over there, and then you did 3 issues back over here. If you did 9, maybe you only did 8. And the way to put your stamp on something and get to that point of being equal with the writer is that you have to be there. Right. And Mark is a complete, solid, 100% professional guy in that he is always there. And you're right, and he always delivers. And he's one of those people that any of us would love to work with just because he always brings it, and he knows how to deliver, and he's a pro. And sometimes we're lacking in that.
Sometimes, and that's something we'll gloss over because there's no point in even talking about it. I want to circle to something. So I said to you, no, actually, I'm going to talk about something else first. You were the first writer to tackle Tomb Raider. And I think that when Top Cow was looking for a Tomb Raider writer, and I do think, not trying to overly sell myself, but I was the person that said, look at Dan Jurgens. They talked to 7 writers. None of them did they feel could actually make Tomb Raider work. And when I suggested you, they said, why do you think Dan Jurgens? He's a Marvel DC guy. And I said, well, he is a Marvel DC guy. There's a reason why he's a Marvel DC guy. There's a reason why he writes for so many artists. It's because he knocks it out of the park pretty much every time. And I think you got the gig fairly quickly at that point.
Yeah, we had a couple of conversations, and I remember asking, what do you want to accomplish with this? Was one of the questions. And then I never ever really accept anything on the spot, right? It's always, well, let me think about it. What would I do? And then after a couple of days, either it's in your head or it isn't, and I'll say yes or I'll say no. And I had a couple ideas of how we could do it and how you could take what at that time was an immensely popular video game and turn it into a comic book that would work. And, we dug into it and got it going. And, that was, as I recall, Tomb Raider #1 was the #1 book of the year.
It was.
And it did well. I had a lot of fun with it. And the artist that we had, a gentleman by the name of Andy Park, he's done okay, I hear. So, it was a win.
It was a win. It was a win for everybody. That's the one thing I think people don't appreciate enough, that when the books are great, when they're well received, when the fans can give books a chance, when the retailers are doing well enough to give books a chance, that's the best thing for the market. I mean, this is what we all live for. We all live to make the market better. On so many levels for all of us, it's more about how do we continue to do this thing that we love? How do we continue to do this thing, this industry, this passion that got us into this? I always think it's funny. Comics have always, every few decades, comics are about to die. You had it in the the 1940s where superheroes had died but comics didn't die. But then in the 50s, comics were going to die. And then in the 60s, John Romita Sr. always said, yeah, we always thought the next issue would be our last. Then in the 70s, you had Howard Chaykin's great quote that we're at the end of the beginning. And there was always something that helped save the industry, for lack of a better way of saying it. You had a combination. Let's look at the 70s real quick, and going into the 80s. You had a combination of the direct market starting to form, but also some creative risks that Marvel DC took it's interesting when you give a creator more freedom at times, it makes a book better. The X-Men were a canceled book that came back because Marvel was trying something new. Claremont and Cockrum really gelled. It took it to the next level with Byrne. And even when you think about it, I mean, a lot of us hold that run in such high esteem, but it was only 30 issues, give or take. It wasn't one of those long ones that you think about. 30 issues is long, but back then that was normal.
Right.
You had Epic come in, and look, we've been through this ever since. The mid to late 1990s, back in 2002. So the industry keeps moving forward, and the better the comics that we all put together, and the better received by the fans and the retailers, the more we grow. Speaking of just exciting books, let me ask you this, and this is going to be the hardest question for me to ask you. What is your favorite character to work on? Because you've worked on everybody, as we discussed.
Yeah. There isn't any one consistent answer to that, because sometimes, if I were to say Superman right now, if I had just been doing Superman for 2 years, that might not be the same answer, because I might just be going like, yeah, I've been doing Superman for 2 years and I'm kind of at the end of it here. I think right now, I just got done or have been working on a project called Generations, where we have Booster Gold in it again. And it was really fun to get back to writing Booster. And I think part of it is because as we talk in December of 2020, with COVID being what it is and everything this country has gone through the past year, just writing a character with that sense of fun and humor and lightness to it has been a lot of fun lately. So right now I would just say, let's go with Booster Gold for now.
Cool. So we were talking about your being the first person that we worked with as dynamic forces on the Death of Superman, and Brett was a part of that. And do you remember, with the return of Superman, flying to our offices in New Jersey and signing for the better part of a week about 35,000 comics?
Yes, I do remember it well, because as long as the days got, it was a lot of fun, because you had some other characters coming through there, not characters, I should say creators at the same time, who are characters. We won't get into names, but it was fun. It was a good time. But yeah, we did. And when I tell people this now, they don't believe me. I'll say, yeah, we did 35,000 books like in 5 days. Oh, no way, you did not. I said, yes, we did. So yes, I do remember that very well.
The funniest part is, I remember you and Dan Panosian and a few of the guys taking breaks, playing a little bit of football catch.
Yep.
The funniest thing that I remember there's a lot, like you said, there's a lot of funny things to talk about, but the one thing, and this is a plus, I will say this is a plus. Dan Panosian did all of his work before flying out to sign X-Men Unlimited #1 and X-Men 304, I think. And he signed 17,500 books. Now, he flew out for a week. He didn't know how long it would take him, but he did all of his work before flying out. And I think he had already gone to New York for Marvel meetings.
Okay.
So when he came to do the signing, he signed everything in 2 days. and he was out there for 3 more days. And do you remember what Dan said at that point?
No.
No, you couldn't. You couldn't. Dan said, I don't have anything to do. And again, pre-internet, pre-everything, right?
Right.
You know, the days where we just barely got cell phones, you know, you were used to having, you know? So Dan said, how much do you pay people to number the books? And I said, well, $8 an hour. Why? He's like, okay, cool. I'll start numbering. Dan has always been a hard worker, and he's always been a talented person. And it always stuck in my mind where he said, you know, I could go to New York and hang out with people and bum around, or I'm here. I like hanging out with these creators, and it's just fun. So he got to be part of it. He numbered books for 2 days. And, you know, plus all the money he made. You know, you and I used to have the running joke, you may sign 35,000 books, but my hand hurts the most signing that paycheck.
Well, yeah. And, you know, the other thing is, you know, what people also don't realize is when you start to talk about 35,000 books, and part of the reason this is fun now, because, you know, creators will come up to me all excited because they sold 20,000 copies of something. I say, well, yeah, I signed 35,000 over 5 days once, but is how much room that,
it was only $2.
Yes. But how much room that takes up. You know, you start to think about how much space you have to sort 35,000 books, and then where they have to go. And especially since some would be like Brett and I were signing maybe Superman 78 and some Adventures of Superman 500, stuff like that. But then all of a sudden, all the Adventures of Superman's wind up on John Bogdanov's table by mistake, and I'm sitting there looking at Man of Steel, and your eyes are glazed over at that point. I mean, you're just on autopilot. Whatever gets put in front of you, you'll sign. And I swear to God, I still know you just gave me some blank checks to sign. But you know, it was a good time. It was the kind of numbers, you know, you can only dream of now, but it was cool. And that in large part because of all the people who were coming through. And I think like at that same signing, maybe like Howard Mackey came through and a couple others, and they were only there for a day or two, and you'd say, oh, nice signing with you, and they'd leave and somebody else would come in. So it was always a good time.
Yeah. You know, there's a run of a comic that you did that I still think people don't realize how good it is. You had a really nice run on Aquaman with Steve Epting.
Yes. Yeah. And I say that because to this day, I'm surprised it hasn't been reprinted. And I will mention it to people at DC. You know, next time an Aquaman movie comes out, you should reprint that and, you know, collect it. And they don't even remember it. And it was because it had these beautiful Mike Kaluta covers and beautiful Steve Epting art. Never mind that I was involved, but it was, I think, a really credible run on Aquaman. And what had happened is they were going to cancel the book. And then they said, well, this is not, you know, it's near death. You want to just see if there's anything you can do with it. And I said, well, what are the chances that you won't cancel it? Well, not real good, but we'll give it a shot. What the hell? So I said, okay, I'll try it for a year. And we pushed it up in sales just a bit, but not enough to survive cancellation. But yeah, that was a favorite of mine. I really enjoyed that.
It is. And again, that goes back to, you know, you're working with Romita Jr., you're working with Andy Kubert, and considering how big of a fan of Romita Jr. I am from X-Men 176 to 200, and I think maybe he went a little bit past that, and his Daredevil run with Ann Nocenti and Al Williamson, which was phenomenal. I mean, John's touched every character as well.
Yes.
But continuing, and he has not slowed down either. It's funny, if you have a conversation with John about his style on the X-Men right after Paul Smith and his early run, he'll tell you how much he hates that run.
I know.
But not because he didn't like working on the book, because he felt his style hadn't evolved enough yet. And I think Joe Kubert once said it best: if you don't dislike, your first 2 pages of a comic, by the time you get to the end of drawing it, because you felt you could do something better with those pages, you're not growing as an artist.
Oh, it's true. Actually, I say it's the first 2 issues. I know that what I have always seen for me is that in drawing a new project, it takes me a good 30 pages to start to feel comfortable with the character. If I have not worked on a character before, and it takes me about 30 pages to find the visual vernacular of what that character is to me, how I really want them to stand, how I want to position them in the panel. And a lot of it is, how do they relate to the characters around them? And to get to that point where you start to, you draw it because it's there and you're never having to go back and adjust it or erase it. And that to me is a 30-page process. And so it's usually, it takes me 2 issues to really warm up into that point where I'm on top of it. And then by the 3rd issue, it's like, okay, I know who this is. I know how they act. I know what their body language is. I know how they move through the course of the story and relate to the characters around them. Let's go. But yeah, I mean, that's just realistic. And so an artist, when I'm writing for an artist and they come back with a bit of an apology or something like that, I'll always say, don't worry about it. It takes me 2 issues. I expect that for everybody. So we don't have a problem.
Cool. Now we're going to circle back to, I don't think people know how selfless and generous you are on a few levels. So you've always been there to help out the industry. You do convention signings for the Hero Initiative, I believe. You've done sketches. You support animal rescue charities. And you're generous with your friends. So I'm going to show one thing and then talk about that thing that may or may not be a little bit embarrassing. Uh-oh. So first, knowing how big of a Flash fan I am, you gave me this as a gift once.
Yeah.
Which I've had forever. People are jealous about it because it is just a great Superman Flash race. And they're always wanted to know who had this. And when they found out I had it, people have wanted it. And it's, I keep telling everybody the same thing. The day I die, one of my nephews gets it and you can buy it from him.
Okay.
Between now and then, I'm Daffy Duck. It's mine, all mine.
That's right.
On another note, you remember 1999 well?
The year?
And what happened?
Well, besides a century coming to an end, I don't know. I don't know what you're looking for here, Nick.
All right. So it's 1999.
Mm-hmm.
And the industry was struggling. Marvel was still in bankruptcy.
Yes.
Retailers were still not doing well. And Capital had shut down, obviously, and Diamond was keeping the industry together. And Dynamic Forces was struggling.
Yeah.
And we had a Hail Mary opportunity come to us. We were able to do, Star Wars Episode 1 was coming up. And we were able to do a significant sale through QVC US and a somewhat significant sale through QVC UK. At that point, not to give myself too much credit, but this gets to you, which is more important. Back against the wall, I mortgaged my house with a second mortgage. I needed to buy product from Dark Horse and from Topps and get books and trading cards and other items signed. So back against the wall and maxed out every credit card because Dark Horse couldn't take a risk. And QVC UK came back to me and said, if you can deliver X, we'll take it. But if you can deliver Y, we'll make you today's special value. We will make you the #1 item of the day. And I fell short by just under 6 figures. And I really wanted to get to the TSV, the today's special value. And basically, and it was all a risk, by the way. Let's not forget, it was all a risk.
Oh, sure.
And I called two friends. You were one of them. And I said, would you be willing to help me? I need X amount of money. And I was really blunt. And I said, look, I've sold some of my comics to raise money. I've gotten a second mortgage on my house. I've maxed out every credit card. I have enough to fly over to enough money left to fly over to the UK. Dark Horse needed to be prepaid, and Titan owned the rights to Star Wars in the UK, and they required $100,000 for me to sell to them. So you came in, and I said, look, if this goes the wrong way, I'll just sell my retirement stocks and pay you back. And you took the risk and loaned me almost six figures, which allowed me to get the TSV, which helped turn things around. Things would have been okay even if I didn't get the TSV, but getting the TSV just allowed the company to be strong again. And I've always been appreciative. And I just think that you deserve a public thank you for it.
Well, the 37% you paid was good enough, Nick. I mean, no, we're friends. And I think you touched on the situation of the year earlier in what you said, which is it was a tough time. The business was sort of shaken out in a lot of different fronts at that time. And, we had some good days. So I was happy to be able to do it and happy that it worked out for you. And, I think it was great because, Dynamic is still here today and Dynamite is publishing, and who knows how things would have been different. You never know, but I'm glad it all worked out.
Yeah, no, I've always been incredibly grateful. You know me well enough to know that the most important thing for me has always been make sure everybody gets paid. My employees, my freelancers, this industry is tough enough. And I've touched on this in the past. Better than most, I've never had the desire to be a publisher.
Yes.
I always felt it was too much responsibility, too many creators, families. And the road of publishing is littered with dead bodies. I mean, even someone like Mark Alessi, who had $35 million, ended up shutting down his publishing company. And it requires more than just skill. It requires luck. And we went through this in 2003 when Marvel didn't renew our license, is the only reason why we became a publisher. Because, again, back against the wall, threw the Hail Mary and just said, well, we just lost 60% of my revenue. I'm definitely able to shrink my staff by 60%, or I can just take the risk that I've never wanted to take. And it's amazing. And the gratification seeing fans read our comics, I can only imagine the gratification you get every time a fan comes to you, and whether you're at a panel or you're at a table signing or at a comic store, that one-on-one interaction that you have with these fans that you bring so much joy to, not only the fans on a monthly basis, but thanks to digital, thanks to trade paperbacks, new fans that keep growing every day.
Yeah, and I think that's very true. And I think one of the things that has become really apparent in this year without conventions is this idea that all of a sudden, and I think I underestimated this, that I underestimated what it means to be able to get out there in public a little bit to see how fans react to the product. Because I know I was talking to a creator here just this week, and I said, it's almost like we know the books are out there and we know they're going into shops and being sold, but it's almost to a certain extent like being 15 years old again, when I would write and draw comics for myself, and then I'd get it done and I'd put it in a drawer and go on to the next one. It's, in a way, it's like the final result isn't there because we don't get the feedback like we do in that personal environment of a convention. And it's not to say that I'm looking for a pat on the back or the creators are looking for that. But when you are at a con, what you see is the enthusiasm for comics as a whole, for what we are as a whole, whether it's something that extends to movies or animation or whatever, and that vibe, that community vibe. And that's something we're just lacking right now. And online tries to replace it, and it can't. And social media tends to be so overwhelmingly negative. And I think it ends up turning people against one another instead of getting people together. So I know exactly what you mean because, yeah, once you get it out there and you have that sense of response, and it's like I was saying about Sensational Spider-Man, where, that was 95 that I did that. And to still get people coming up to you, 25 years later, looking for the signatures and responding to that work, yeah, there's something about that is cool. It is, and we all know that.
It is, and that's the thing. I do think while the economics of conventions have changed in the last few years, most creators still go to conventions to give back to the community. To be in touch with the fans, because for everybody inside and outside the industry, time is becoming more and more precious. I think one of the things, besides the maturity, one of the things that keeps me going is the quote from Bernard Shaw, we don't stop having fun because we grow old. We grow old because we stop having fun.
Yes.
And when you walk into this industry, I think almost any industry, but entertainment especially, where you're touching lives, when you walk into this industry and every day you keep in mind that everything you do will touch someone one way or another, that you're bringing to fans and potential fans the same feeling that other creators brought to you, you continue with your A game. And in regards to social media, and I'm sure this is going to end up being clickbait quote for somebody. No, what I'm about to say. Social media is pretty much anti-social media these days.
It can
and so many people, I really feel so many people who spend so much time taking comics apart, if they would spend that same time or even a good portion of that time actually building comics up, the industry would be in a better place.
It could be. I think that what happens is, it's a more anonymous environment, and people are willing to say things hiding behind their names that they wouldn't necessarily say to you if they were standing in front of your table. And I don't mind it if people don't like my work or like the story I've done or something like that. But at least let's be kind of square about how you phrase that.
Yeah.
So, but I also think it has become an arena of cheap shots in a way, and that's not good. I just think there's a better way we can comport ourselves, whether it is in person or online. And again, it's not because they have to like something I do or something like that, but it's just we don't have to turn it into this pissing contest, which I refuse to get into, by the way. I just plain don't indulge. But I just don't understand that sort of acerbic nastiness that has to exist sometimes, because to me, ultimately, at the end of the day, you wouldn't do that to your next door neighbor, and you wouldn't do that to anyone you were standing in a room with. So why do you do it online? Kind of comes down to that.
It's the internet beer muscles, so to speak. You know, it's the people. Well, you know what? Some people just enjoy it, and they hide behind the fact of being righteous, and they just enjoy. It's just so weird. Like I said, at the end of the day, spending time promoting the industry is more important than anything, because I think at the end of the day, we all just want the same thing. We want to continue in this industry. There are plenty of creators that have left the industry who have done well for themselves. They've gone into animation. They've done storyboards. You know, you look at some creators like Stephen Platt. He's got a great career. I don't think he left comics because he doesn't love the medium. You look at it and say he's just that talented, and he was able to go into a medium he enjoys more. But most of us who want to stay in this medium, who want to enjoy what we do, we should be spending more time just promoting it, just doing the best we can. And that's the end of my preachy sermon about this.
Okay. No, and I agree.
So basically, right now, what if you had a dream project to do? And I've actually got a good piece of news that I'm going to lay in a second that just happened today. But if you had a dream project to do that you haven't tackled yet, name your top 3 dream projects, if you have 3. And again, this may be a little bit more difficult because you've tackled pretty much every iconic character.
I have. Wow. You know, there were always a couple of things at Marvel that I never got around to because I didn't spend as much time there. And it's funny, I always had this attraction to Iron Man even before the movie came out, where he got to be a much more popular character, because I think there's a complexity to Tony Stark that I like. I think Doctor Strange would be a lot of fun. And then I have a couple of things on my own that I want to do, and that I've always had sort of in the back pocket and said, when the time is right, it'll be time to go do it. And I think those would be up there too. So that's kind of what I'm looking at now.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, Near Mint Condition has a good relationship with David Gabriel at Marvel, and they announce a lot of the collections that are coming out. And something that was sent to me, Marvel will be releasing a Captain America by Dan Jurgens omnibus in 2021 as part of their 80th anniversary celebration.
Cool. Okay.
So I think that it's well earned. I mean, you know, I'm looking at this and I'm optimistic that it'll be 25 to 50 plus your annuals.
Well, you know, so here's the thing that, again, this is something I explained to younger creators. When I got in the business, and I started I think I first started drawing for DC in late 81, with my first book coming out in 82. Our stuff didn't get reprinted.
Right.
You know, you drew it and it came out once and that was that. And at that time, DC did something called the Best of DC Digest size comic. That would be this little 4x7 digest, size book that would get put together at the end of the year, and they would put their best stories in it, and it would come out. And I think the first thing I may have ever had reprinted was a short Legion of Superhero story that I did that Paul Levitz wrote. And I was like, wow, I got reprinted. That's cool. And I never, ever could have foreseen the day when things would end up, almost anything we did, getting reprinted as trade paperbacks or something like that, which is why, as we talked about Aquaman earlier, the stuff I did with Epting and Kaluta, that it's odd that hasn't been collected, because it's one of the rare things I've done that hasn't been. So not only would that have been hard to imagine, at that time when I would have started, the concept of something called an omnibus, which are these big, heavy, heavy books, none of us could have conceived that. None of us ever did conceive that. We couldn't possibly have foreseen what that industry would look like, that we would get these massive books put together that way. So that's cool to hear about. It's always fun, because I remember when we didn't have anything like that.
Yeah. It's I'm going to end this in a few minutes, but it's amazing. You talk about you're doing the Legion of Superheroes, and it makes me think of two things. First, your Legion of Superheroes run was short, but it was around the Grell, Cockrum, Jim Sherman age, right?
No, it was.
Oh, it was after Giffen?
Yeah, it was Giffen. It was when DC went to the hardcover, softcover plan with Titans and Legion of Superheroes.
Right, the Baxter paper. Baxter paper.
Yes. So Keith Giffen and Paul Levitz were doing the Baxter book, and Paul Levitz and I were doing the newsprint book in terms of the Legion of Superheroes because they had two titles at that time. So that's when was that 83, 84, right in there. Yep.
And I think they called the regular Legion Tales of the Legion and Tales of the Teen Titans.
Yeah.
Mind is a terrible thing because you and I always talk about Dave Cockrum Legion art. So
Cockrum to me is just this awesome artist who left us way too early. I think he was phenomenal and still doesn't get the amount of credit he deserves for what he did on X-Men.
The amount of credit he deserves for the X-Men, for the Legion of Superheroes. He was one of the best designers this industry's ever had. He loved the fans. This is a guy who would sell his original artwork cheap because he felt all the fans should be able to afford it. And unfortunately, the fans profited and he didn't profit enough. And I mean, towards the end of his life, he was doing fill-in books and annuals. And
you know what, though? You know what? So I got it. So here's my little story with Dave. And that is, I was writing Justice League. And I was writing and drawing Justice League. So this would have been 91, 92, somewhere in there. And we had an annual coming up. And there's no way I could fit it in to draw it. So I asked if we could get Dave Cockrum to draw it. Because I knew he was looking for stuff, and I loved his work. And we got a little bit of resistance, but Brian Augustin was the editor. Brian was on board 100% with the idea. And we were able to get Dave the annual, and I know he really appreciated it. And as I look back on it, one of the things that I am so glad about is the various people that I have gotten to work for, whether I got to write for somebody like Dave Cockrum or John Buscema or Gil Kane or Kurt Swan. You know, you go down the list to say that I was able to write for them or draw for some of the writers that I was able to draw for. It's a nice feeling to know that you work with them some way, somehow. And I was really happy to be able to get Dave that Legion annual that year.
Well, and the thing that I want to end this with on my end, and then obviously you get to end it with whatever you would like to add. I have to think, like I said in the beginning, it's really great that you're the first person I got to interview. I hope I get to do more of these. Time will tell. But as a creator, and when we were talking about the ability to see the fans, see the joy, how you touch them, knowing that you're reaching them by selling more books, and today selling more books is not only physical, it's digital, it's collections. I think your legacy, which still has a long way to go.
I was going to say, I'm not dead yet.
No, which still has a long way to go. I make sure I said that. I think your legacy that you will have such a large, the Captain America collection is just another example of it. It's Captain America's 80th anniversary next year, and you are getting a collection. The fact that you have one of the largest libraries of books and is just incredible. And by the way, what I was going to say earlier that I forgot about, and then I will circle back to this. It's funny, you worked on Batman No Man's Land. You actually worked on one of my favorite Batman detective runs when Jerry Conway was writing it and Don Newton was doing a lot of art. And there's another artist who died too soon and never gets the respect and appreciation that he deserves.
True, very true.
And you did the last page of Jason Todd's parents being alive.
How about
that? But your body of work, whether it is work where you first started, where you worked with other writers, an incredible body of work that you wrote and drew, a body of work that later you wrote for other artists, and you continue to work with other writers, it is going to be one of the most encompassing and prolific bodies of work that this industry's ever had. And we don't think about this stuff until somebody brings it up. So now that I brought it up, how does that feel?
It's funny. I hadn't ever really thought of that until just about a year and a half, 2 years ago. But it feels, and I hadn't thought about it because I hadn't really started to consider the amount that's out there. But there's a website out there that kind of charts the amount of work that people have done. And if you look at the amount of art that it credits me as having done and the amount of scripting that it credits me as having done, I'm way, way up there. And I'm totally unique because I'm a writer artist and there's no one else who has that amount of work across the two disciplines. And so I look at it and I think what it proves, well, I can't ever say proof. I think what it indicates is that you try and deliver good, solid material. And as a creator, it's so important not to get to the point where you're jaded and acerbic and can't find the joy in working. Because I will say, I still enjoy the process of working. And this isn't such a secret. There are a lot of guys who like having the books done, but they don't necessarily like the process of getting those books done. But I enjoy the process of working, and I enjoy getting to work with different people and learning from them. And it's nice to be able to continue to contribute to these characters that we've all grown to love somehow, even as the characters change. So I'm really pretty proud of it, I have to say.
You should be, because it is incredible. And look, every creator has books where either they felt they were, for lack of a better word, dissed by a publisher or by a co-creator, or felt like the fans didn't appreciate it for what it was. And you just need to get past that.
Yeah, I mean, no one bats 1,000, right?
Right.
And, I'll just, Nightwing, which is something that we're just bringing to an end right now, had a lot of problems going when I walked onto it. And, it wasn't an easy book to take on because of those problems, but I think we made it a much better book than it had been, because we were able to free it from some of the problems a little bit. But at the end of the day, it's one of those things that is, a much more complex thing than most comics have to be when you're writing them. I'll say that. So I think, yeah, you can't work in comics for any length of time and say you bat 1,000. No one has done that yet, that I can think of anyway.
And you just got to not resent when life did hand you a bad hand. You just need to move on and you need to do the next project. I'm going to leave this with this. For any fans that are watching this that have never picked up a Dan Jurgens book, try Dan Jurgens book. You can go to your local comic store, pick up any run of his books. Just pick your favorite character. He's touched it. If you can't find it at your local comic store, try the digital edition. And then if you like it, buy the rest at your local comic store. Let's support the local comic stores. Let's support the entire industry. Doesn't matter if it's Marvel, DC, Top Cow, any of the publishers that he's worked with. It's just, we all need to try something new. And, George Bernard Shaw, we're not getting old because we're not going to stop having fun, right?
Right.
Dan, anything?
I think that takes care of it. The one thing I'll do is I will mention we have Nightwing and Batman Beyond, both of which I'm writing and are coming to an end in December. But I think Nightwing has a very special story to mark the end. And then in January, have a book coming out from DC called Generations Shattered, to be followed up by Generations Forged in February, which makes kind of a nice little statement about things. So that's what we have coming up. So you can always look for that.
Awesome. Well, Dan, thank you very much. Have a great one. Thank you, sir.
You too, Nick.
what a great interview from Nick. Thank you, Nick. Thank you to Dan Jurgens for taking the time to sit down with us. This has been Talking Shop. We're going to come back a few times a week with this show. Tune in Wednesday and Thursday for a double shot with John Romita Jr. We will have John Jr. on by himself on Wednesday, and then with Scott Hanna on Thursday. These are interviews we did during our EXP Expo weekend, so those will be super fun to watch. Tune in tomorrow night at 8 for In Stores This Week with Nick and I, where we will be talking to Ryan Stegman, who is on Venom. And then on Friday, we will have Greg Hildebrandt, who is just a magnificent cover artist. You might know him as the guy who painted the Star Wars posters. And Scoop McMahon, who's an independent artist. They will be on Friday. Head over to our website, guys, comicshoppingexperience.com, and sign up for our mailing list. Head over to our YouTube page. Just go to YouTube and search _EXP. Will pop up. You'll see the logo. Hit subscribe, hit like, click the bell so that you can get notified when we do things. And just be tuning in every night, guys. Tonight, live on the EXP, starting at 6 o'clock here on the Comic Book Shopping Experience, we have Mishmash with Miss Jen and the Six Shooter Jesse James show. So those are two shows not to miss out on because they've always got great stuff and always got good deals. So you're going to want to watch those. We will be back in just a little while with the shows for today. And we'll be back tomorrow with the pull list starting at 6 o'clock, which is me. Then Minute to Skim It at 7. And then I come back for a minute and we lead into In Stores This Week with Nick and I. And again, tomorrow night featuring the interview with Ryan Venom Boy Stegman. Yeah, that's right. I called him that. So we will be back very shortly. We will see everybody then. Thank you for tuning in. Until we see you later, bye, everybody.